without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sarah to her stage and her panel. Please put your hands together.
Good morning, everyone. Right, you can hear me. First step done. Sam's brilliantly done introductions, so we can crack on. Do I need to stand at the lectern? Yeah? No? I can sit down? Excellent. Thank you. Right, some excellent talks already in a day of data and measurement. So we're going to get specific about the measurement framework, or the connective tissue, if you like, between all the different tools, techniques, practices, partners, and stages of the consumer journey, I guess. And I loved Sam's analogy earlier about bringing the bands together, although I don't feel qualified necessarily to be a band manager, but I'll give it a go. So straight on to the questions then. So the first one we have is, so what are some of the principles, or the key principles in bringing together tools effectively within the measurement framework? And Gordon, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot first, but I think you might have a bit of a perspective around this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Gordon Black, Director of Media Measurement at Adidas. I'm very, very passionate about this subject, so stop me if I get carried away, and come chat to me afterwards if anything sparks your interest. But on this topic, I loved how Sam set the scene for us today. Like the measurement framework is what it's all about. The three key elements he talked about: attribution, testing, MMM, and the need to bring it all together is absolutely critical. The way that I've been framing it recently that seems to really resonate is, we've moved on from a world of single source of truth, which often the solution was like digital attribution, which had so many faults, but it was what it was, and at least you could rely on it. Now you can't even rely on it for what it was. So moving now towards a single framework for truth, using the right tool for the right job, for the right decisions, but being really clear about what those jobs, what those decisions are, so that you know you're using MMM for your annual planning, your quarterly planning, but you're using testing to get more granular on specific tactics, specific formats. And then you have attribution, because you do still need a real-time signal to react to and everything, and then it all plays its part. And for that to work though, it's education to the right level, not over-educating. It's getting it to an understanding that is needed and not more, or you'll lose a lot of people. And then just kind of real transparency and alignment on language, speaking a common language, meaning the same thing when you talk about the same thing, which is an impossible challenge. We're all going to use the word AI and mean completely different things later on. Many of us are still guilty of saying digital, meaning completely different things. It is a challenge, but that's what you need in your organisation, a consistent definition of how you refer to these things.
Love that. So consistent definitions and transparency to understand A, what you're looking at, B, where it fits, and C, how it is all moving towards an ultimate outcome. It feels like that's kind of the next stage on, or the next level of depth of talking about common goals, doesn't it? And Maddie, if I may come to you on that point. So what do you think agencies can do to support support that education and that transparency around all the measurement techniques?
Yeah, I think we're seeing similar in terms of looking at a more unified measurement framework, and our clients adopting that. I think that over obviously time with cookie deprivation and the way that we measure and report, now more than ever before, to have a full view, a holistic view of all of the measures is so important. And being able to look across the entire marketing landscape, so across OESP. And I think what we're doing at dentsu at the moment is we're starting to join the dots between consumers and customers in what we're calling, keeping with Japanese theme, ketsugo, which is bonded measurement. So that's a unified measurement framework that actually focuses on clients' outcomes, business outcomes, measuring the short, mid and long term, because MMM obviously always important, but again, understanding the short term, the fast moving metrics, the mid term to understand brand engagement and the balance between brand and performance is so important. So yeah, full advocate of the unified measurement framework.
Fantastic. And I love, so part of the unified measurement framework and what you're talking about with outcomes, I think is fantastic. I know as an agency person, you know, quite often you'll get a brief with a KPI on it and you'll start to interrogate that KPI. But there's a lot more data now available, isn't there, over time series, you know, over lengths of time that can really establish what they're doing for more lagging long-term metrics. So, yeah, also loved the charts that were put up before around consideration from the global way of doing stuff. Yeah. And Barney, if I may zoom out from that a little bit to an industry level, what are some of the industry tools, techniques or initiatives that you think exist or are coming that might further help to join up measurement in different ways?
Yeah, so on that, the one thing I would say as a research supplier, the one thing I would think you always have to have is that everyone is on the same page at the beginning. Mm-hmm. The amount of times over a long period of time that you have one party that's not involved from the start, i.e. it's the agency or the advertiser or the media owner or the research supplier who hasn't fully briefed everyone, and then you get to the end and someone says, well, no, it's like being tested on something when you weren't expected to be tested on it. So I would always say that what key element is get everyone on the same page at the beginning, because that is absolutely key to stop things going wrong later on, or people suddenly saying the results aren't what we were expecting, or that's the way I would have said that. I mean, there's a huge amount of tools, and as you mentioned, suppliers, obviously. I wouldn't say there's one size fits all. You've got more of your base level measurement services, the read frequency, you've got brand lift, you've got attention, you've got verification, you've got mix, which is, I think, is very important to the long-term view more than the sort of micro view or a particular campaign performance. So they all have a place, they all have a value. I wouldn't say that there's one that's winning all, but if you speak to different brands, if you speak to Gordon, he'll have his opinion. You talk to another one, he'll probably have a different opinion. So I don't think that there isn't a consensus. Mm-hmm. If anything, it's probably got more complicated. Mm-hmm. And actually, there's more availability of what you can measure, and it doesn't seem to end. So things become very topical for a couple of years, and then they don't go away necessarily, but something else will come along and add to that.
Yeah, there were predictions and a lot of chatter, wasn't there, about super silos a couple of years ago, and boy has that absolutely been the case. So not only are we grappling with the usual questions around reach and frequency and silos of digital versus offline, we've now got retail media, you've got Amazon, which is becoming its own silo in and of itself, and obviously some of the more traditional players integrating and buying each other, so that measurement is improving, but it's also becoming more complex. And then we've got attention coming in from stage left, haven't we, to create another metric. May I just check, do I have 8 minutes left, or 2, or 3?
You have 22.
20 minutes left. Fantastic.
Going to need some more questions.
No, I was like, we're on question number 1, and I'm running out of time. So that's very good news. Thank you. I can't remember which one of you, may have been several of you, mentioned the depletion of cookies, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that everybody is very happy about that. But what are some of the changes to measurement that you've seen, or the application of measurement since the depletion of cookies has become a significant factor in what we're doing? And I'll throw that open to anyone that would like to answer.
Yeah, I'll jump in. For me, it's like, to be honest, I'm not on this bandwagon of it's a good thing cookies are going away. I think the world needs a better education on the trade-off being made of data collection, but respecting privacy and that sort of thing. So the death of it in itself is not a great thing. But what is a good thing is it leading to the death of attribution, which was so misunderstood for so long and so often misinterpreted. And that is the greatest thing of everyone's now openly talking about how useless that was when it was being used wrong. I'd say it's really led though to the evolution of the importance of testing There's much more language around, even just doing control tests, hold-out tests isn't enough now. You need more advanced methods like causal impact modelling to control for these things. But the more sophistication does bring in more room for complexity, more room for variation in approach, and risk of understanding. The big thing that I'll always talk to is incremental impact of what we have done. And that words now, it became like that was the thing to catch people out. You weren't just talking attribution, you were talking incremental. A sale I am getting that I would not have got had I not done this activity. Now that language is being stolen back again by some of the big tech providers by being an incremental change on my attribution reported sales. Make sure when you're talking incremental, you're talking about, is this an impact that would not have happened had I not made this investment?
I love what it's done for metrics like base. So obviously with attribution, you didn't really have a measure of base or how many sales would have been driven in a month had there been no advertising. So I think an understanding of those types of metrics is really, really valuable, particularly because it varies so wildly in different categories. So it helps everybody read a digital report as well as market mix modelling reports. I might switch to the AI question then, because that's could be quite well aligned to the attribution question. So obviously we're in a cookie depleted world now where we have to try and forecast the gaps of the sales that are coming in that might not be being attributed to a particular channel. And again, certain tech providers have a modelled conversion to plug that gap, which is based on AI. So effectively, you have your own campaign results, and then you have a market of other campaign results, and that AI attempts to plug those two things together to give you an overall output. Be interested to hear if anybody thinks that's a good thing, it's a bad thing, whether anyone truly understands what it means, and potentially, and this is probably one question too many, whether inserting the media partner that deeply into the heart of measurement is a good thing. Don't throw me daggers, people. Just to be slightly provocative to whoever wants to answer.
AI. The one thing, we've touched on that. We've done a little bit on AI, and the one thing I think is, it's very much in its infancy. Mm-hmm. You're learning all the time, and I think what we're doing today in the models will only get better. Yeah. The more you feed it, the better it will get. Yeah. And I think there is concerns that what is maybe saying today isn't maybe quite correct, but that will only improve by continuing to invest and continuing to put more inputs into it. So, we've done it a little bit on the mix side. Really, is where we're testing it more than anything else. But as I said, it's very much in its infancy.
And it's not the endless conversations around differences in web analytics tracking and digital media tracking and other tracking tools were exhausting. With AI-based measurement, you can't track that. You can't track that logic flow in any way. So it kind of halts that conversation, doesn't it? Other than to, I guess, perhaps be doing more and more of our own testing and measurement of similar results to it to see if we can recreate that result using other data sets.
I think that it's exciting that we've got this capability, this progressive capability, and it's something that we were talking about 10 years ago, with IBM Watson and NLP, and it seemed to slowly progress, and now it's just exploded. If it helps us move faster to get to the answer, then it can only be a good thing. Whether it's tried and tested, I think it's still fairly nascent. I mean, we're using it in terms of kind of doing comparative nested models at the moment, and that's good. We're finding that we're doubling down in terms of kind of the helping us automate some of the rudimentary data prep pieces. It hasn't taken away the need for human econometrics capabilities to be able to kind of look at the data, disseminate it, pull out the rich insights and share that. We haven't got to that point yet, thankfully. But watch this space. It's exciting. It's good. I think we need to embrace it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is exciting. Anything. So we were. AI could be applied to the more traditional forms of analysis in the data collection, as you're saying, but also in the analysis itself. Sarah Treliving / Goodstuff's, belief is that, an econometric model that tests over 100 different variables is the way to go, if that's the type of measurement you're using. But the ability to put econometric studies together and measure them on aggregate to create meta-analysis, if you like, of what the whole industry of results is doing is quite an exciting prospect. The ARC are obviously doing stuff like that, but the more initiatives like that can get off the ground will really improve the sort of causal data points that can probably plug the modelled data in the short term in my dream world. Brilliant, thank you. So flipping back to a second about the kind of operating models around the measurement. So does anyone have a strong point of view on the benefits of external versus in-house capabilities, or some of the pros and cons, or the need states for in-house versus external versus the potential pitfalls?
I do. I very much do. I've experienced best of both worlds and seen both work, so it's not a one-size-fits-all, as you say. It'll be very unique. When I was at Sky, we led a very large in-house econometrics team and media testing team, and it worked. You were able to control the conversation, you were able to pivot. That brief at the start is always going to change by the time you get to the end. If you're in-house, you can react and be aware of it and really act on it, and that resulted in a lot of really impactful decisions being made and a change of the culture really at Sky. Then moving to Adidas, one of the reasons I was excited to move was actually pivoting back the other way and having working with external suppliers, where you get fresh thinking, you get an independent perspective, you truly are able to kind of have more reliance on best practice development without relying on just talent acquisition and that sort of thing. So you're absolutely kind of able to kind of see it can work internally, or you can really rely on the expertise of others. The big issue with internal is the complexity of your business will determine the size of the team that you want. It'll be a much bigger team than you realised to really do MMM well. There's a lot goes on in MMM external agencies to kind of make it work, from data flow parts to the capability itself, to most importantly making the results forward looking and turning it into scenarios and optimisations. So unless you've kind of really got the scale to commit to something massively internally and find the right people to lead that, I would absolutely champion the fantastic agencies out there that be that your own media agency and their intelligence, or other third-party providers as well. It's well worth exploring, but it will be what works for you, and I'm always happy to share a perspective on your organisation.
Fantastic, thank you. Can you hear me with this one? Yeah, good. Anybody else want to comment on that? Or?
So I think that both work. I work client side as well as agency side. I think, to your point, I think having it internal, it's easier and you're more agile. You have the ability and you're closer to all of the data and all of the teams. So you've got the data at your fingertips. I think the benefits of being an agency, we get to work across a plethora of different clients, industry sectors, which is amazing. So we get to see different nuances, different ways in which teams work. I've worked with clients where we've deployed within their own infrastructure, Databricks. We help the teams model. I think the biggest piece for me is around collaboration. I think if you have full and transparent access to the data, to the insights, and you can work with the in-house teams, it's a perfect combination. And that's what we always strive to do. And just going back, but that's why the unified measurement framework is so important, because you have a single version of the truth that everybody's working to.
Love the term calibration that's come back in fashion, hasn't it? Used to be called econometric multipliers, but, you know, matching that long-term stuff back to, you know, what the practitioners in each media are seeing on the ground and can verify, challenge, and action effectively is definitely the way to go. But, you know, the amount of experience and, to your point, category understanding that's required to pour into an econometric model, because you can be the most fantastic modeler, but without context of what you're looking at with the results, it's very hard to stand up in front of the chief finance officer and define a marketing budget over the next 3 years. So, yeah, variety, skill, and the ability to react does sound like the right thing.
We did a study, a marketing study, a little while back, and it was about the importance of this, and surprisingly to me, it said the importance of marketeers was 70% thought it was important, which I thought was quite low, because I thought you probably got 99% thought it was important. But the interesting stat is that 17% of marketeers thought it was actually that they could apply it in a really usable fashion. So I think there were so many data points, it was so complex that they actually, they didn't have the confidence in essentially applying it, and that is the challenge. I would always advocate for using the research agents, third-party agency, of course, because we can give that independent stamp. But I understand, I think that the benefits of doing it in-house, where you can probably get more granular on the data and really look at it and mine it in different ways to maybe you can if you've got a third party looking at it in a more holistic way.
Makes absolute sense. Where are we? So, how about real-time data then? So we've talked a bit about AI and increased capability for automation, for data collection, macro analysis, but how can you, or how do you incorporate real-time data to make better in-flight campaign optimisations? Or I guess a slightly broader question is, what is there any new insight that's been facilitated by an increased amount of automation and data processing? Maybe, maybe not.
No, it depends what you class as real-time data a little bit. And I think that's a bit of a bit questionable. Is it daily data? Is it by the second? Is it, that's that definition of real-time I struggle with a little bit.
Well, also what you apply where, right? Because you know, humans are fairly typical in some respects, like our thoughts, our beliefs, our lifestyles can be quite static, yet the decisions we make in the moment can be impacted by a huge amount of things. So when you're trying to write a data strategy and you've got some, you know, macro kind of and static qualitative insights, how do you act on that versus as acting on, you know, in the moment data like the weather, or, you know, someone standing in front of a shop or a shop aisle? It's kind of, and my response to that would be, again, it's about bringing talent together, because, you know, your digital team will probably understand that real-time data because they've got amazing media partners that they're working with that are at the coalface of kind of processing all of this stuff, together with the econometricians, with the client who understands their business better and their consumer better than anyone, and the wonderful research partners as well, to bring insight from the market. So does anyone else have any perspective or successes?
Yeah, for me it's going back to that, the whole point of the single framework of truth and the right tool, right job, is it's knowing which decisions you will make off the real-time data, having that clearly defined and not getting carried away with real-time data showing your sales are going down and your brand campaign's just launched. It's like, we're not judging that part on that real-time, so it's being really clear which decisions are going to be made on that part. I was really keen to jump back in though on Maddie's point earlier about, you know, who does the analysis. The partnership is key, so whether it's internal, external, it should be one team. It should be done as people that have full knowledge of the business, are invited to the conversation, are presenting to the decision makers, understand the decision makers' needs, and it doesn't matter if it's internal or external. And just to flag with internal, there's also a reality of there can be a real challenge on credibility and trust of an internal team as well. So there's advantages of access to data and that sort of thing, but you can actually have, struggle to have any credibility if you have a complex organisation where they think you're answering the questions from your bias kind of thing. So it's partnership is just all that matters, and building that trust. How you can achieve that might actually be through external expertise.
Makes sense, doesn't it? And we were talking about the fact that, every planning or measurement process has always had to be iterative, but with so many options at play now, you're kind of looping back to the beginning at every stage. So it's not just iteration, it's complete re-evaluation at every stage to, understand whether CRM is behaving the way it is, actually, the sales data that you can see from Amazon from the TV ads that you had on their network, is that, how does that factor? So, yeah, collaboration's never been more important. Completely agree. Now, we've got 5 minutes left. Would everyone be comfortable if I opened the floor for questions? Yep. In? Good. Right. Okay. Do your worst. Hi, Sam. Go on.
So I'll try to find another mic after this. Hi, Sam from Adwanted Events. So when you're designing your model structure for your measurement framework, what's the point at which you think, okay, this is too complex, where you have limited resources internally or with your external provider? What point do you say, okay, that's enough information? When do things become too granular?
That's a great question, and I think it is the constant wrestling challenge of is the quick answer good enough? And it's a word you assess when you've got a good enough answer, but rather slightly dodging the question, I go back and say well, you probably need to go deeper than you think. That quick answer is not good enough. You need to go a layer deeper for it to be meaningful, for it to be brought back up. Or you'll come up with a quick answer that steers you in the right direction maybe, but you'll quickly unravel it when you do go deeper. So it's always weighing it up. It's weighing up, well, each part of the tool, how long it takes to implement it, what time frame it will give you answers on. Is that good enough? But it's being really clear on what the dangers and risk will be if you don't go to that depth and make the decision that is wrong.
The more data, the better.
More complex.
Are there any more questions from the audience? Oh, great, I have a couple. See one over here. Please, could you just let us know your name and who you're speaking for?
So I'm Pierre Nagar from Mint. We're actually a SaaS business. We actually support brands, their advertising workflow through automation and AI. Given the complexity of media and fragmentation, there's new channels coming up all the time, retail media, digital out of home, audio, etc., etc. I'd be interested to understand, because you talked about real-time data, you talked about MMM, you talked about attribution. Are you able today to bring all these things together when it comes to addressing the challenges of your clients or your actually media strategy? And if this is still a challenge, is it an organizational challenge in terms of how you structure your teams internally, or is it also a technological challenge?
Good question.
And you could answer probably yes to all of those. I think that's the thing. I mean, it's every organisation probably has its own challenges, and it depends on what you were trying to achieve in the first place, the level of complexity. So I think. Has anyone got it solved yet? There's some, I think in some situations we've had it solved for some projects, and other ones where it's not gone as smoothly because you haven't had everything aligned in the first place. So, I mean, from the advertiser and agent's perspective, it'd be interesting to know, because you've probably lived the real coalface of it.
That, as I say, it's kind of, you need to make it all work together. So it's kind of, there's no option. It's you make do, and be transparent on the assumptions you're making is really what I'd say. Otherwise you lose that trust that you built up, all the credibility that you have.
And I would say the actual measurement framework is the output of a whole lot of analysis up front. So, you know, a measurement framework, if it's been sort of hastily put together based on a broad-based role for channel, it's not going to be working cohesively towards an output in the short or the long term, really, because of all these differences in tracking and the way they work. Ideally, every metric that you've got in your measurement framework will have been evidence-based, evidenced through a bunch of analytics up front to deliver on an outcome. And it might be, if you can't evidence it, it's pivoting the data set. So if you've got econometrics, you can deliver a multiplier to get from your attribution or your web analytics to an output to your last click wins even. So actually a measurement framework takes quite a long time to put together.
I think from a technical perspective, I think there is absolutely capability out there that allows us to bring all of the component parts together. I think the use of clean rooms now, not only for activation, but also for advanced analytics. We're using those environments more and more to carry out things like regression-based attribution. So we're able to then optimize and actually get those results and then inform on flighting. So yeah, there is the ability to do that. I think it's, again, evolving, but yeah, we're embracing the technology as it comes downstream.
Any more questions? We have a room for a couple more. Oh, Sam?
Sam from Working Media. Clearly like the sound of my own voice. But there's a question for Sarah and Maddie as kind of representatives of the agency community. Clearly, as measurement frameworks are becoming more advanced, there's an increased demand on data from the media agency, and you know, the media data can often be one of the kind of most painful aspects of putting together a model. So I was interested to hear your perspective on how agencies are adapting to this increased demand on that media data.
Show you best. So the data can only be collected from something that's been set up the right way in the first place. So your experiments have to be planned, set up, discussed, and the opportunity lost, discussed, from holding out certain regions, etc., to be able to collect data in the right way. And it's all the dull, potentially, but necessary things around naming conventions or labeling, if you like, to which, you know, technology is definitely providing better solutions for. But also the agency model and how it works influences data collection as well. Like, are your teams, your reporting capability, your trading deals all set up to give you the granularity that you need to be able to report back on? So out of home is a brilliant example of a very difficult medium to measure effectively. So, you know, do you have the data to the depth of the panel type, size, location to be able to feed the model in a way that really supports the output? So I'd say it's part art, part science, part technology driven for sure, but I'll let Maddie speak as well.
I agree. I think having clean and transparent data fosters a culture of collaboration. I think as the landscape changes and more channels come into the mix, I think having that technology in place to be able to collect that data in a meaningful way, to ingest it and then be able to retrieve it. But I think the taxonomy, setting up the correct schemas, obviously there are challenges as well. You know, depending on where the activity is happening, sometimes we can only get access to aggregated data rather than log level data, which sometimes is a little bit frustrating. But you know, we live with it. But that's why I think the setup is so important, and the flow, the fidelity of that data that you're using is really important.
And sorry, there was one thing I forgot. So the other
Major response is investment in data platforming, so that once you've got all that lovely data, it's in a place that is serviceable to clients and to measurement partners.
So I'm being the face of doom, but that's all we've got time for. Thanks very much, Thomas.